Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the local news show that covers all the terrible things going on in the San Francisco Bay Area, or at least as much as we can. Sadly, my co-host, D. Scott Miller, will not be here for this episode. He woke up super sick, and he can't even get out of bed, so that's really sad because we have an awesome guest here today. We have a Berkeley insider, I would say, a man who's been volunteering his time and participating in Berkeley politics for years. He's also been involved with Oakland politics as well. He was the manager of the Port of Oakland Environmental Department. He's a coastal protection analyst with the California Coastal Commission. He's also he's the Berkeley's Building Commission, the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board, so many other things. His name is Jim McGrath, and we are honored to have him on our show today.
Well, thanks. I don't think I've ever been lauded that much in an introduction, and I'm not sure I deserve it, but I sure appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate people like you, people that really dedicate their time to making a difference, to fighting for their cities, for fighting for their residents. I mean, honestly, Jim, you do a lot of good, and you deserve your props.
Thanks.
Yeah, anytime, man. Well, why did you get into it? How'd you get involved with Berkeley politics?
Well, I started in government many years ago at the Coastal Commission. And, I was young. I thought I knew far more than I did. And it was a really heady place to work. And I just kept doing it, and I kept learning things. And hopefully I kept getting better at my craft. When I retired from the Port of Oakland, I was financially comfortable. My wife doesn't like to travel, so we had enough money that I could do what I want. So the main thing I do is I set out to try to make my city a better place and better governed, because I understand government a fair amount. And then I decided to spend the rest of my spare time windsurfing and volunteering, teaching kids to read, write, and do math. And mostly that's joyful.
Yes, love it. Yeah, see, man, look at you. You're like an angel, like a real life angel over here. Always doing good. I gotta love it. Well, so you've been in for what, years now? What, since the 90s, volunteering your time with Berkeley politics?
Well, I was involved in the local neighborhood planning group 35 years ago, something like that. And then I dropped out. I mean, the job at the Port of Oakland was pretty intense. So at the end of that was 20 years ago, I started looking around for things to do, and where there were people taking care of things that I trusted, I left them alone. And where I thought I could make a difference and nobody was doing it, I stepped in.
Wonderful. So how has Berkeley's political landscape changed over the years? Especially, it seems like since Jesse Arreguin became mayor, there's been a kind of big switch, especially towards pro-police, pro real estate development. It seems like there's a big push that happened under him. Am I correct in assessing it that way?
Well, I think Jesse has, I've heard from many people that Jesse has disappointed them. I got to put myself, I think, politically in the middle. I have a son-in-law who's a cop. He's an Oakland cop. Mm-hmm. And I get stories and have an understanding of what the nature of the job is. And I've seen Berkeley cops in action in difficult situations and been pretty impressed. So, I think you need police. You need police that don't have to prove something. I'm also an engineer. I build stuff. So I am pro-development. In fact, if you go back to when Jesse was first elected, I voted and supported for the other candidate because I considered Jesse to be pretty NIMBY. He and Sophie had developed a downtown plan that was, I thought, overly prescriptive And I do believe, and believe then and believe now, that you needed to have development increased in downtown Berkeley in areas where it was actually possible to live without a car. Not everybody's going to do that, but that's possible in some areas. Jesse certainly isn't a NIMBY anymore. He is a full-blooded YIMBY, and he's taken a lot of money for it. And that's disappointing to somebody like me, who 30 years ago, as a member of the LeConte Neighborhood Association, supported mid-rise and density bonuses through my neighborhood on Telegraph and Shattuck. And I think moderate development, the kind of development that I supported when Tom Clark when Tom Bates was mayor, like the corner of Martin Luther King and University, which was very controversial. I'm fine with that. But putting it everywhere and not taking account for the amount of fire hazard that exists in some areas, the very bad streets we have in other areas that just won't carry the traffic, and the need to have places for families. I raised a family in Berkeley. They went to Berkeley schools. I volunteer with school kids. I ride my bicycle, but when I go to Oxford, there's usually one or two other bicycles. When we're talking about a school with 200, 300 students and 30, 40, 50 teachers with two bicycles. That's not something that everybody's going to do. Mm-hmm. Parents are bringing their kids to school, and they're doing other things. Sometimes they have 2 or 3 kids in school. So, I think you need a more nuanced vision of what intensification and development works for the city economically, and leaving the diversity of people that are living in rental places, and that's fine, and people that are settling down in Berkeley and contributing to the community.
Yes. Thank you. So thank you for saying that, because it's so true. Especially like I tried raising a family in a small apartment sized place, and it was impossible. It just didn't work, and it's sad that there's a focus on multifamily dwellings that are not affordable still. And they're just saying, like, you need to change how you think about raising families, where it's like, no, I don't mind. I think families should always have a chance for a backyard, and like kids should have their own rooms if possible, but we're seeing that over and over again, and especially with our city council members pushing this narrative that like families, we need to rethink how they dwell, and it's just like, well, there's also something to be said about having a single family home and why it's important. But also there's a good point too to bring up as you're talking about zoning and the missing middle debate. This is actually a good thing to bring up for in terms of Berkeley, because there is this almost battle to expand density in areas that really can't handle it, and we're talking about the Berkeley Hills. This since 2019, it's been known as a fire, like a area of extreme fire danger, and basically, it's not if a fire happens, it's when the fire comes. But they still want to build up there and increase density, and even. I believe it was the Turner Lab, UC Berkeley's Turner Lab, which is kind of like I would say a think tank that's pro real estate development think tank that's like pushing, saying, don't worry about how bad the roads are, and don't worry about, access for emergency vehicles. You can, just have people not drive up there, or and they could just take Ubers, and stuff like that. But it's so crazy to see this debate over it, where you have a fire chief saying straight up, this is dangerous. We can't build up here. And then you still have the other side going like, well, what? You don't want more neighbors? You know, it's such a strange debate. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I was silently supportive of the new high-rise development around the University of California. I mean, the university added 15,000 students and no housing. That was one of the factors that pushed up housing prices, no doubt about it. I mean, 15,000 increase in students in a community of 100,000, it's 15% increase. I thought that the ADU modifications mandated by the state legislature were great. I'm an activist. I've walked precincts in Berkeley many times, and you find these granny units. A lot of them, I'm sure, are not legal, but they're consistent with the Berkeley community character. And I don't want to go back to a strictly single-family dwelling fabric. I would like to see the fabric of the city maintained, and the ADU effort was pretty successful. I don't remember the numbers, but pretty quickly you got a couple hundred new units. Now that's not going to solve the problem of that 15,000 units, but it's sending you back on the right course. Even the staff that have talked about the missing middle have tried to kind of present the more moderate perspective that this is not going to create a lot of units. And I'm frankly just disappointed that there isn't the kind of work both to define how you want to retain community character, and which doesn't mean no growth. I mean, Berkeley's the fourth densest city in the state of California. Obviously, densification didn't deliver affordable housing, and thank God it's easier to get a building permit now than it was when I was working on my house. But so densification alone is not the answer. And so if you think about what's possible with the density bonuses and the like, I mean, for the most part, height limits disappear. You can put in, I think it is 8-story housing. It's the kind of thing that is probably only going to happen in West Berkeley. But what my thought about it, I got two thoughts to take home. First of all, the whole discussion has made it impossible to consider that both sides have a valid point. There is a housing crisis. We should build more housing. I don't think that the city is particularly expert in what's going to work. I don't think that of the legislature either. I've been involved in development issues for 40, 50 years. There's a lot I don't know. And there's more, I think, that the city council doesn't know. So you've got the city intervening in the market without much knowledge of it. And you've got this sense that there's only one side. And we don't have to work to try to have an honest dialogue. We don't have to work in the middle. We don't have to try to create consensus. And for God's sake, we don't have to be transparent. I know people that are making money in the YIMBY world. Mm-hmm. They don't recuse themselves in Berkeley committees. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to name names, but they know who they are.
That sounds about right too, and that's what they don't want to talk about too. Is YIMBY and now being called the abundance agenda. That's a lot of that is profit based, and they try to make it seem like it's going to be the ultimate solution for everything. And we've seen that not play out. Building has not really brought down rents. Upzoning has not brought down the cost of living or being, the availability, because guess what? They're building these new things. And since they want high rents, they want profits. They're not making the rents affordable. So a lot of these new buildings are going up while kind of nice. I'm not a big fan of cladding, but that's like a classic exterior material that's being used for these buildings. But yeah, you talk to people that live in these buildings, you look them up, a lot of them are like half empty. And we have a big homeless problem.
Yeah, it's expensive to build, but I want to drill in a little bit on where the money's coming from, and since you gave me a heads up, I pulled up some of the sources that I've consulted over the year to refresh my memory. So this first one that I'm going to give you illustrates the problems of transparency, and it's on the Housing is a Human Right website.
Okay, and
the title is update. Why is California YIMBY hiding the names of big money contributors? It's in news by Patrick Range McDonald, and it's dated April 20th, 2022.
Man, yeah, if you could email me that link later, that'd be great.
I'll do that. And what it says is, they asked California YIMBY director Daryl Owens. That's a name that came out of. You can find that name on Berkeley side. Every time there's a housing issue, he worked for Turner. He's paid in different and it accuses him of lying and misleading when asked about the funding for California YIMBY. So I understand that the Supreme Court has said that free speech is something that corporations have, and the nonprofits that, some of them fantastic, that build affordable housing, that take care of our homeless, that do things, they have a right to lobby and express their opinion, but I want them transparent. That's the first thing. And that article says, oh, well, we're all in on not transparency. The next thing, you mentioned Jesse Arreguín. So I'm going to give you, the question always in politics is, where's the money? Why did Jesse go from being somebody that was so YIMBY that I wouldn't support, so NIMBY that I wouldn't support him, to the darling of the development industry? Well, here I have transparencyusa.org. Jesse Arreguín for State Senate District 7, 2024 Committee for candidate Jesse Arreguín. $1.7 million in total contributions. Who's at the top of the list? 21,800 California Real Estate PAC. Next, California State Association of Electrical Workers, also 28,800. Maybe that's the limit. Next is California State Council of Laborers PAC, California State Pipe Trades Council PAC, IBEW PAC, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Northern California Carpenters, Operating Engineers, Local 3, State Building and Construction Trades Council, Laborers Council. Oh, that last one dropped $500. It was only $20,300. The rest of them are $21,800.
They felt a little frugal.
So that's where the money's coming from. I'm pretty sure if you checked Wiener and Buffy, you'd find fairly similar campaign contributions.
Yes. California State Senator Scott Wiener, who's the guy that pushed the requirement for local cities to be forced to build more units, as well as the bill that basically says the state can override local city building codes, etc., or not building codes, but like regulations. And then Buffy Wicks is the local assembly member who is pushing the abundance agenda right now, with more kind of basically ways to override local regulations on building and stuff. So yeah, it's so true. It's so disturbing, how basically quid pro quo it is. And I mean,
I don't know that it's quid pro quo, because that gets you into bribery and it's not legal, but it is entirely legal, and it is influential.
There's
no doubt about that.
Exactly. And this, you brought up Daryl Owens, who I would call one an arch enemy of mine. uh, Basically, during the Measure EE versus Measure FF battle, he was very awful to me. But it brings up. I wanted to talk about Measure EE because you were the one that wrote up the measure, and it came after a successful No on L campaign, which was basically, they were going to raise money and millions and, have little oversight over what could be done with those millions for projects. That was shut down, but they came back with Measure FF and won, despite Measure EE. But coming away from that campaign, I thought, wow, how vicious was that? How insane of a battle it was over basically funds for paving roads, and Measure FF was much more about cycle tracks, which are like the hardcore bike lanes with curves. You even have to have special street cleaners to be able to use to be able to keep them clean. But yes, this battle, how coming back now that we've had a few months away from it, what are your thoughts? How did you walk away from the campaign?
Well, I lost. I misjudged the public mood. So, I mean, I own that, and hopefully you learn lessons. Beyond the personal, I think the streets need to be fixed. So I'm not really that sorry that there's a little more money in Measure FF to fix the streets. Not as much as they claimed, but there's a little more money. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you noticed it today. I am still a print guy. So in this morning's newspaper, there was a report of I think it was the state Supreme Court about waivers. There was somebody who was training for a AIDS ride, and they came down Redwood Road in Oakland, hit a pothole, and went over the handlebars and were badly hurt. And they can sue the city of Oakland for poor. Now that's ironic because I ride a bicycle. I rode distances for quite a while, and my training partner hit a pothole. It might even been the same one on Redwood Road, and it cannot ride anymore. Same thing. He went over the handlebars. What's interesting about what the case said was cities have a responsibility to keep the road safe. And, in the larger, I've done environmental things and kids' educational things. Those make my heart sing. Roads, it's just kind of trying to get the details right. But I was not all in on the enmity of a car. There's a very funny program that the city funded in Berkeley. They funded electric bicycles for those that were willing, and then they did a report, which is good because sometimes the city promises a report and then doesn't do it. So they did a report. The average mileage of those bicycles for a week was 13. Now, I ride a bicycle twice a week down to Oxford School to volunteer. Like I said, sometimes there's 3 bikes when I get there. Sometimes there's only one. I do more than that in a week on a real bike. That doesn't scale. I think bicycling is good for exercise. It's good for keeping your attention. You get to poke. I love poking around my city because I love my city. I like to see what it looks like in the different streets. I have to avoid some of them because I'll fall. But the idea that somehow cycle tracks and electric bikes are going to give us a brave new world, that's just a fantasy.
Yes, so true. We've seen it too, even with the the bike bridge, the pedestrian bridge that was built over from Gilman. Like I never see anyone on that thing. I don't know how much
I've
it's
ridden it
been.
quite a few times.
Oh, that's good. Like, so we got somebody use it. But no, it's so true, because it's so funny that you bring this up, because for me, the issue is that while there's a lot of great talking points around biking, and like, because especially if there's a lot of fear over climate change and everything else, it still manages to avoid what the real issue is, which is gentrification. But there's been plenty of studies and reports that show that bike lanes are basically it's almost, would I say, the Pied Piper of gentrification, at least a sign that it's coming, or that it's there. And you even had books about it. What was it? Bike lanes or white lanes. That's even talked about in Capital City by Samuel Stein. But it's funny, there's just this huge pushback against it, to making, bike lanes so much more a thing. And it's not coming from big bike people. Cannondale is not throwing down millions of dollars to get people on bikes. There's something else going on, and it's called a $217 trillion real estate industry.
Well, there's certainly a lot of shared people between the Walk Bike Berkeley arm and the YIMBY arm, and certainly I was attacked, and certainly in trying to negotiate a single measure. I mean, I came out of this because when we ran Mayoral, if you go back to my fundamental issue, it's one of transparency. Tell me what you're going to ask the public for, and then build it. And then report on how it worked, whether or not your cost estimates were right, what you learned. I mean, that's just the total quality management applied to governmental services. It's been around in government everywhere but Berkeley since about the turn of the century. And I just think transparency is fundamental to democracy. So having something that says, well, there's a big bucket over there, and we can do anything at all on any one of these 9 or 10 plans, and you may or may not get your streets. There's the second part of the issue, which is the quality of the design. And I'm frankly, as a bicyclist, I come up to, and as somebody owns a car and takes my wife out to dinner, she rides a tricycle, but only about a mile. And so we're not going to go to Albany to dinner on bicycles. And I've almost run into these funny curbs that the city's popped up almost everywhere that don't have reflective lights. They're in the middle of the path, sometimes in the bicycles. I mean, I tried to go up to campus on the new facilities. I get to Bancroft. There's a curb right in the middle of the bicycle track. Who did that? Who thought that made sense? You're trying to look at pedestrians. So the city had a real problem with design. Now, the guy that did that is gone. But I would hope that there's actually some process rather than rubber stamping, so you get good designs. I mean, there are places. I was on the Bay Trail board for about 10 years. I ride the Bay Trail. I know a lot of people do. I know it increased recreational use. It does have commuters, but it doesn't supplant people's need to get around. It doesn't supplant the fact that Berkeley is a regional draw in employment. And it may be fine to get the last mile for Berkeley yuppies to get on an electric bike and get somewhere without being in a car. But if you're coming from Livermore and you're teaching in a Berkeley school, you're not going to ride an electric bike.
No, you're not. And taking BART is just as difficult too. And so expensive. I mean, that's the thing. They want to compare it to NYC subways, but I'm sorry, you're talking like the difference of $4 to $5 a trip. But yeah, and it's such a good point too. When we were working on Measure EE together, I would talk to a lot of bicyclists when I was trying to, get endorsements. And I would hear over and over again about how cyclists actually don't like the cycle tracks. They actually they don't like how it's confined, and they hate it when, say, they're biking in one and there's somebody with an electric bike bearing down on them behind them, and then and we also got to talk to people that are what is the proper word? We talked to blind folks like Eric, who talked about how awful it is to deal with cycle tracks when you're blind and your dog is confused by them. Your seeing eye dog is confused by them. So there's so many issues with these cycle tracks, but yet they're kind of forced down our throats, and we're told that we hate the future or hate things because we don't want them.
Well, again, it's the other part. My first meeting with one of the people that was in Walk Bike Berkeley, I stayed out of the Hopkins battle, but I met Donna, and I talked to her a little bit about it. And I talked about it from the perspective of a bicyclist and somebody who did think we should invest in Berkeley infrastructure.
Yeah.
But
we should say real quick, the Hopkins thing is I would say a small, it's a pretty important road through Berkeley that takes you kind of it's parallel to the downtown. It's kind of far away. It's more North Berkeley. It's next to the BART station. But there's also this cute kind of business district there. And the bike plan wanted to remove the parking spots around there, which the neighborhood hated. And it became this big battle of, well, the neighborhood wants the parking spots and they want to keep the businesses around, and the businesses would be hurt if those parking spots would be removed. But on the other hand, you had all the people going like, what, you don't like the future? What, you want to keep polluting the environment? Blah, 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 blah. But anyways, go on. Sorry, go on.
And so I met with one of the guys that organized the die-in, and I didn't know that at the time, but he was with Walk Bike Berkeley, and I was told that he wanted to have a discussion about maybe some common ground. And I said, I just don't like doing politics like that. I don't like scorched earth politics, whether it's our city council or the MAGA world. I think when you move from an activist role, which I've been, to an appointed role, you represent everybody. You don't just represent your district in Berkeley. You don't just represent pedestrians. You represent everybody. And so with that, I think comes a responsibility to look for middle ground. And I said, I don't want to do politics that way. And so my pitch to them was, I want to do what we can both agree on. That'll get us some of the way down the road, and it will begin to have a more healthy political dialogue. I was told basically no. We have no interest. I was told by Ben Gould, we have no interest in a consensus measure.
Yeah. Yep.
Period.
That sounds about right.
So, and then I was accused of not being willing to compromise. So, the thing about, I ride over to that neighborhood. I still have coffee with Lori Capitelli at that corner. I wouldn't go down Hopkins. I mean, I ride on my bicycle I ride everywhere on my bicycle unless it's raining. There's lots of paths that get you over there that minimize your exposure to cars. Why in the world do you have to be in a cycle track with cars and drivers that are angry because they're cut off because of a cycle track? I mean, I don't want to thumb my nose at drivers. I want to be able to get to where I'm going safely. And being in a cycle track and being restricted on how you can escape when somebody does something crazy, which it happens, at least once a month when I ride. I mean, the idea that infrastructure is the answer to safety on a bicycle is just not correct. Full attention is the only thing. Full attention in defensive bicycling is the only way that you can stay alive.
Yes, yes, yes. We are Berkeley is one of these cities that it has the Vision Zero plan. That means, no pedestrians, no one getting killed by cars anymore. And yet, you have to take into account too that people accidentally kill themselves all the time on, on things like scooters and stuff like that, hitting curbs, that kind of thing. Like there's even accidents, and so it's kind of a very difficult goal to have. But it's so interesting too. You bring up Ben Gould, the former uh, Berkeley city. He was a Berkeley mayoral candidate as well as a city council candidate, but there was some iffy things going on with his campaign that he was called out for. And now he is the consultant, basically, with a company I believe he started himself called Eco Data Lab. But he is very involved with Berkeley city politics, and you've even had some run-ins with it where has he basically helped push out certain city staffers that he didn't like?
I don't know about that. I mean, you may be referring to Liam Garland, who was the public works director, who I thought fairly highly of. Liam and I saw eye to eye on, at the time that Liam was appointed, I was still chair of the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And public works directors, because of the problems with urban runoff, public works directors were my constituency. They needed to rebuild the runoff systems and control runoff. One of the ironies of the Hopkins, just as a little sidelight, is the guy working on it tried to rush the project through so they wouldn't have to do any pollution control. And Hopkins, in Lori Capitelli's real estate office, I think it's Red
Oak.
It's abuts. It's on Hopkins and it abuts Codornices Creek, which is the last steelhead creek in Berkeley. So tires are really harmful to salmonids. Let's see if we can avoid the regulations. I mean, Berkeley. This is Berkeley's approach. This is where the environmental movement started. This is where my hero and mentor, Sylvia McGlaughlin, started Save the Bay and essentially environmental movement. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can avoid protecting the streams. Oh my God. So Liam was forced out. I've talked to him about it. I mean, I think he was forced out by one of the candidates for mayor, the unsuccessful candidates for mayor. Ben may have had a hand on it. I haven't heard that part of the story.
Well, yes, but we've talked before where you've been in meetings, I believe, with Ben and a city staffer, and Ben made it very clear he didn't like some of the things that were being said. But that's probably another story. Hopefully, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I do.
Okay, good. But yeah, that's the thing too. That's what I think, and why I wanted to have this episode is that it's such a strange movement happening in Berkeley where it's very much these people kind of cloak themselves in progressive policies and ideologies. We want to stop. People should be biking more, and we want to stop homelessness. But then there's so many anti-Berkeley things coming through it where they want to avoid environmental regulations. They want to it's so weird. And I think that's what people are missing, that they think, say, somebody like Adina Ishi winning the mayoral seat is like, oh, we're going to see big changes in health and different. And it's like, I would say it's less Berkeley now. How are your feelings about especially the impact of this real estate and YIMBYism on Berkeley, and how it's changed what we used to know of the city?
Well, having worked within cities and having worked on budgets and looked at budgets and budget trends, I guess my big disappointment, other than transparency with the budget process. I mean, the city has a budget, and then they have a CAFR, the comprehensive fiscal report at the end of the year. And those aren't really completely straight up budgets that are transparent. I've been worried about the marina for years. I was on fiscal subcommittees at the marina, and I didn't find out how they were managing money of that until the Division of Boating and Waterways found it out and said, oh, well, they're taking all this money that's coming from boating fees and they're spending it on city staff for maintaining the parks, which is not illegal, but has basically broken the marina.
Oh.
So as far as Adina, I met her very early on in her campaign. I gave a contribution to her campaign because I wanted another candidate in the race. I was somewhat surprised that she won. She is the pro-development candidate. I don't think there's any question about that. And so Berkeley, Oakland need to pursue ways to augment their funding in order to provide the services that citizens ask for. But they also need to establish priorities, and they need to have an understanding. So I'll give you a couple things about the marina that do concern me. You have to do your homework. I mean, I do my homework. I'm a conventional liberal. I believe the government needs to do things. I'm left of center, not hard left of center, but a little bit left of center. But I also think that you should spend what money is generated through the government on the things that help the most people, and the things particularly in investments that are going to add value. They're going to add jobs. They're going to get people off the streets, not necessarily the people that walk precincts for you. So, and there needs to be an expertise. So housing, does housing always pay for itself? When it's brand new, some of the new stuff I think does. I've seen pro formas. As time goes on with Proposition 13, that revenue shrinks while the costs go up. And what, does it stay good forever? I don't know, but I've never heard the council discuss that. What I've faced at the marina is we're gonna put new hotels and restaurants down there, and that's going to solve all the problems. I sat in meetings. I was chair of the Parks and Waterfront Commission. I sat in meetings and talked to surrounding areas. They haven't been able to lease that for 7 years now. And the idea that they're going to have triple the square footage out there, build new hotels with restrictions on how much parking there is, while the 5 biggest hotels in Oakland have closed, while Doubletree, which is the only rainmaker at the marina, is in fiscal problems, while they have one restaurant that's really generating an appreciable arena. So that you need to have an understanding of what your market actually is. One of the many justifications that's been thrown at me about the ferry was, well, this will help our biotech industry. So and Genentech has one. They take their people down to whatever it is, point down in San Mateo County, south San Francisco. I want one of those. You have a 650,000 square foot building that I supported right on Aquatic Park. Yep. That has some really nice public benefits. It's vacant.
Yep.
There is, I used to work at the Port of Oakland. I just talked to their governmental affairs guy last week. There's hundreds of thousands of square feet. 62% of the storefronts in the commercial space at Jack London are vacant. The investments by the Port of Oakland started in 1990. They have a ferry. It somehow hasn't fixed things. The idea that the best go-to people for understanding commercial real estate development investments are city politicians should scare everybody listening. We have a track record. The Port of Oakland lost money on commercial real estate every year I was there.
Yeah, and it's like Jack London could be cool. I mean, there's like great music venues there, everything else. Yeah, but it's just been stalling. It's just never, and it's kind of cute. I used to work at KTBU, which is right there on the waterfront. You
Yeah,
can walk
no,
around. It's beautiful. Yeah, and that's the same thing with Berkeley. Actually, I mean, I didn't mind the life science buildings when they came up on Aquatic Park, except for the fact that I used to love taking my kids to that area, to that park. It's much harder to find parking now, though. You used to be able to just pull up right next to the water and walk to that cool little playground, the old wood castle playground, and now it's much harder, and was all that parking and stuff was taken away for those life science buildings they're empty, and that they still want to expand too, even though no one's renting it. They still want to keep adding to it.
Well, Kevin, they're getting entitlements. They're not building.
Oh.
They're getting entitlements. They're not building. Building has stopped. The interesting is the most affordable housing right now is that in receivership. And I try to look at that and keep a file of what's defaulted on its loan right now. I mean, with restaurants and hotels going belly up, that's the best way to provide shelter for the homeless. Unfortunately, cities don't think ahead of that time. They don't think that, well, the economy goes in cycles. Building goes in cycles. I mean, I've been around the development industry for 50 years. I've seen the lemmings go off the cliff 3 or 4 times. Oh, yeah. Commercial buildings in downtown San Francisco. Yeah. Subdivisions in San Diego County. Yeah. And there's a lot of money to be made, and there's sometimes a lot of money to be lost. Mm-hmm. So, and cities aren't good at that. There's too much on the plate to devote the kind of energy and research you need to do it. And there's always people pulling at you. That say, I voted for you. I raised money for you. I know what's going on. This is what you need to do.
Yes. And that's a thing, especially too, so much of it is speculation. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at. It's like a lot of people just want to be able to roll the dice. And as you pointed out with the donors to former Mayor Jesse Arreguin, a lot of it is labor. A lot of it is the people involved with the construction and building that want that want these projects. But the sad part is you get them going, and there's such a good chance that they'll just sit empty. And go on.
There was a big I mean, this happened in windsurfing. Windsurfing took off, and then nobody expected it to level off, but in fact it does. So there's a market saturation. You find your buyers, they find you, and then they sometimes move on to something else. So, in recreation, there's been big cycles for windsurfing, big cycles for stand-up paddle boards. Wings are the new thing. And if you've been in business for a while, you know that you can't have a business plan based on continued 20% growth. When I was at the Port of Oakland, we were looking at a couple of years where imports from China were increasing by 15 to 20% a year. It's not going to go on forever. And so with the biotech industry, everybody jumped and said, boy, this is the golden goose. So it wasn't just Berkeley. And in fact, the university built facilities close to university because it's so hard to drive anywhere in Berkeley. There are facilities that were built in Emeryville. There were facilities built in Richmond along the shoreline. And what I thought, which is development along the shoreline, will generate enough extra money to start making the shorelines more public, just isn't working completely. So you have to look. The biotech industry's largely moved out of the Bay Area. Rents are too high.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Too high.
And the thing is, and they're telling us, this abundance strategy will bring things down, upzoning will bring things down, but it really doesn't seem to be happening, because I think these investments, and because you see that there's not this desperation to get tenants. They can sit on these buildings, keep them empty, and doesn't matter. They can just sit there.
Well, I mean, I think the Commons building is in trouble. I don't think the investors are very happy for some real estate projects, where you're talking about the potential investment in something that might eventually be condoized, or you're talking about laundering money, which the Orange Peril used as his business plan for many years.
Yeah.
You can lose some money as long as you get it out of Russia, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. 50 billion a year in foreign investment into American real estate. I mean, that's all I got to say. It's kind of insane. Oh, man. Well, I mean, so I don't know. It's so funny that they talk about the abundance being the like Ezra Klein's book, Derek Thompson's book. They say that this stuff is going to be the solution for the Democrats to keep them fighting against Trump. But I say what I see in Berkeley doesn't prove that true. I think it's the perfect example of how, just serving one industry and practically bending over really doesn't have the benefits they espouse. How do you feel about how this is kind of getting more momentum and having it seeing how this really works from the bottom floor,
Well, how many years past the New Deal are we?
Yeah.
The idea of government as an active entity in redistributing income, built on the theory, first of all, that you want some level of dignity for all people, and that's my vision for the homeless. I mean, I don't have tremendous sympathy on people who litter and abuse drugs and scream and yell. At the same time, I want there to be some basic level of decency for every person and some possibility of improvement of their life for everybody. So part of the theory behind typical liberal policies were, if you cycled money through the system repeatedly through either construction activities, and purchasing, or a consumer economy, it would have benefits. It would have a multiplication factor. And that doesn't happen with the accumulation of money and the purchase of art, for example, by the ultra rich. You see art behind me. I'm not buying any Van Goghs. So, is money being used to create new jobs, to create new wealth, to create new opportunities, to increase the efficiency of our overall system and make jobs that pay well? Or is it being used to rev up your
portfolio?
Well, I'm thinking of Elon Musk with his saw there. Is it being used to extract power or exert power,
Yes.
and continue trying to compete and be the richest? So the Democrats don't know exactly why they lost.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Some of it was turnout. Some of it was a very effective and simple messaging system on the part of Fox that convinced people that there was inflation and it was threatening them, and that Trump could bring manufacturing back to the United States, and a very poor messaging system by the Biden administration. And Biden did more to actually do things to start bending the path towards more sustainable energy and towards more sustainable manufacturing. I mean, U.S. is still a huge manufacturing economy. And he did more to improve that and improve the possibility of unions than any previous president, certainly in my life. I wasn't alive for Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. Yet that wasn't well messaged. Now, is that all? Is there a certain amount of resentment to my pronouns are he, she? Yeah. Do I think we have to start every meeting with an honoring of the Ohlone? You know what we did with the Native Americans was unimaginable. Mm-hmm. It's not made up for by that.
Yeah, exactly. Or what was it? Aragorn gave back 1 acre of land yeah.
Well, there's another piece of the railroad right away, so there's a little more. The Native Americans that I have dealt with are very interesting people. They come out of a different culture than mine, and I just hope to live long enough to be respectful to all cultures and learn what I can from them. So, wokeism, I mean, I found it a little too. And I find, the lack of dissent allowed in the Democratic Party in the East Bay to be pretty damn stifling. Mm-hmm. So, so the idea that Donald Trump is going to be a savior of free speech, oh my God, he's anything but.
Yep.
He's the worst thing that's ever hit us.
Yep.
So so there was a very effective messaging, and the progressive wing. I mean, you see it in the East Bay. You see Wellstone, which I belong to, and the corporate Dems, raging at each other. And I just go back to there are real benefits to trying to create consensus.
Yes,
there really are. There are political benefits, there are economic benefits, there's social benefits. I don't want people in my city screaming at each other. I don't want people organizing a die-in over a really silly and badly designed cycle track. That's not good behavior, much less good politics.
Yes, yeah. Especially too if those campaigns too, even though with good intentions, are still pretty shady. Like that. I got screamed at and attacked by people like Daryl Owens after a bicyclist was killed by a car. The bicyclist was 79, the driver was 78. And they said like, oh, it was just because these roads are unsafe and people drive too fast on that one road, which was Rose. But I was the one that pointed out, well, also, too, that area is badly lit and they probably had problems seeing the bicyclist, But that was, no. That was against their narrative. And so I got screamed at. But, yeah, that's the thing that kills me, too, is that you bring up a good point. Sure, there's something to be said about focusing on, how things are said, on language instead of results and plans. But at the same time, too, the left punching is not going to help the Dems. And you see that over and over again. The punching left, that's your base. Why do you want to hurt your base? Why do you want to push your base away? Especially when your base is probably your most energetic, most aggressive, ready to fight for you, Why do you want to hurt them? Why do you want to push them away? I will never understand the strategy.
Sigh.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. Sigh. Well, man, I hope our audience learned a lot from this conversation. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time on a Saturday to speak to me about this stuff. There's so many more things to go into. I'll probably have you come back on because you are so knowledgeable on what's going on here. And I think people need to understand too, they need to watch the other East Bay or the other Bay Area cities. That's why our last episode, I talked about Emeryville and how that's basically been a lab for real estate interests really coming in and being forceful about taking over the government and setting up a top-down system where you basically have, you know, a king in a sense, or at least that's how the Emeryville Tatler blogger Brian Donahue has been covering the city for years. That's how he put it. They want to set up kings, and in Berkeley, it's almost like you're seeing like what is the most effective way to push against progressive politicians. And so I really hope our audience tunes into what's going on in Berkeley and listens to Jim here because he knows what's going on. So thank you again, Jim, for coming on.
Thanks for asking me, Kevin. I'll send you those links.
Oh, wonderful. And so thanks again for tuning into the Doomloop Dispatch. We're on all the socials. We're on X. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. And I'm sorry I've been slacking on that. We'll get up more videos, but please check in for that. And please support our Patreon. We always need the support, all the support we can get. Hopefully we'll get some good guests next week and we get Scott back on. But until then, as we always tell our audience, keep fighting the good fight.